Hi, guys. Welcome to the How I Raised It podcast, the show where you get an inside look at how real entrepreneurs and VCs raise capital for their businesses. I'm your host, Nathan Beckert, and today's episode is with Ben Lamm of Colossal Biosciences, a de-extinction company using genetics and biosciences to bring back extinct animals like the woolly mammoth and the dodo bird. In this episode, we talk about the science and technology of what he's doing, how to identify investors who have a long event horizon and who invest in moonshots, tactics he used to raise over 225 million, and more. If you're tuning into this podcast to learn how to raise capital for your business, I've created a super valuable free welcome package for you. It includes a list of 2,500 investors who don't require a warm intro, plus 200 questions that investors are going to ask you. This will really help you get ready to raise capital. To get instant access, click the link in the first comment. While you're there, please leave us a nice comment, what you'd like about this episode or the series in general. And last but not least, if you enjoy this conversation and think someone else would too, please share it with them and hit that subscribe button to get all our latest episodes. Thank you. Now sit back and enjoy this chat with Ben.
Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by Foundersuite.com. Today I have Ben Lamm of Colossal Biosciences coming to us from Dallas, Texas. How's your day going?
It's going good. No complaints. It's like 107 here, but besides that, it's good.
No complaints except for 107.
Except for just terrible heat. But I feel like we're not alone in that journey right now.
You know, the funny thing is, so I'm out in San Francisco, and we put on an event last night for VCs and LPs on a rooftop. It was like a rooftop networking mixer, and everyone froze their asses off. This is July 18th, middle of summer. It was so cold from the fog that like people literally were huddled around the fire pit and, you know, putting on blankets and stuff like that. So
yeah, I need to be out in San Francisco right now.
Well, let's get it right into it because you're doing some really interesting stuff. Tell me, what is Colossal Biosciences?
So Colossal is the world's first de-extinction company, and we're focusing on building a suite of tools and technologies that will ultimately become our de-extinction toolkit that allows us to bring back woolly mammoths, thylacines, dodos, and other species, as well as build technologies that help human healthcare and conservation.
Interesting. Okay, so the two logical next questions are, how are you doing it? And then why would the world benefit from bringing back the woolly mammoth, for example? Yeah.
So how we're doing is using a combination of really cutting edge genetic rescue technology. So these are, next gen sequencing to understand genomes, AI and computer analysis to understand the differences of those genomes, CRISPR and other tools to actually edit those genomes, and then advanced reproductive technologies that we're also giving to conservation groups and other NGOs around the world that can be used for surrogacy for animals. And then we have an entire team that's focused on artificial wombs. That's a little bit further in the future, but our hope is eventually we can grow everything ex utero, and we think that's pretty valuable. And so we think that the individual technologies themselves are pretty valuable to humanity from a healthcare perspective, or for conservation purposes and preserving these critically endangered species. And outside of that, there's been a lot of great work done in ecosystem restoration, rewilding modeling. So it shows that when we reintroduce animals back into, especially keystone animals, back into the biodiversity set that exists in that ecosystem that they were lost from, they fill that ecological void and the entire ecosystem benefits. And so in the case of the mammoths, our hope is to rewild them back into the Arctic areas and into the tundra to help start repopulating that area with a more biodiverse set of animals.
Wow. So cool. Very cool. So super interesting stuff. What's the genesis story behind this? How did you come up with this idea?
So I really think I'm more of a steward of George Church's idea, right? And so George Church, if you don't know, is the father of synthetic biology. He's absolutely incredible, and he's really helped driven the entire industry of genetic engineering and next gen sequencing forward. And I reached out to George to talk to him about computational biology and how we can use software. My traditional background's been in software and in building technology companies around core software problems. And I really wanted to do that, but because I'm curious, I was on this call with George, and I was like, well, what else is your lab working on? Because I'm on the phone with this like, industry luminary, and he starts telling me all these cool things. And then he ended the call with, and I'm working to bring back mammoths to help develop technologies for conservation, as well as, sequester carbon in the Arctic and build better biodiverse ecosystems. And then he had to go. And I was like, wait, you just said the greatest thing to me I've ever heard, and now you have to go. And so literally like a week later, I was in his lab, and we decided we're going to go on this journey together.
Cool. Awesome. And all right, this is amazing. I have so many questions that we got to get to the fundraising part, because that is the thesis of this show, but have a million questions. What's the ultimate business model of this? You sequence and capture all these DNA. What do you do with it?
So all of the sequencing work that we do, we publish to the world for science, right? Because we don't see really a strong value in that. But a lot of the technologies that we're developing have a direct application for human health. So, think of it very much like the Apollo mission, right? Like going to the moon built a lot of technologies that we use today that are worth billions and even trillions of dollars in some cases. And so in our first year, we've actually spun out our first company, Form Bio, which is, based on the original call to George, an AI-based computational biology platform called Form Bio. And, we raised an oversubscribed $30 million round of financing for that first business. So all of our early investors now get option value in that, while they're pursuing the core business. But we're also starting to work with governments. There's a huge biodiversity and carbon credit component of the business. And then we're starting to look at what are the educational programs that we can do around this, working with top folks in kind of the media and entertainment space. So there's kind of multiple facets to the business, but technology is kind of the core of what we're working towards.
Yeah, interesting. What was the motivation, not to go off on too much of a tangent, for spinning out that company instead of just keeping it all under one roof?
Well, we built the technology because we need it for our ultimate. I believe in kind of being as laser focused as you can, right? And so our goal is, de-extinction and species preservation. And so we aren't going out and applying our technologies to, single molecule discovery, drug discovery, or, protein engineering or cancer research. But some of the tools we're building have massive applications to human healthcare. So if we find an opportunity for the technologies that we're developing on our path towards de-extinction to build something that's highly monetizable and create that option value for our shareholders, well, then we'll spin it out. There's a lot of other technologies that we're developing that we will not spin out just because it doesn't make, probably the most sense economically. But if we can find a true business case, we will spin it out. Because that's different leaderly. Going after helping solve a big biotech's, production problem or doing drug discovery, that's a completely different management team. That's a completely different focus than, bringing back, and de-extincting, core genes in the mammoth.
Yeah, cool. One last mini question on the science part of it, but I guess to do the mammoth or to do any of these extinct animals, you need a core sample of tissue, or what are you starting from?
Well, it depends. We were very lucky with working with Dr. Andrew Pask on the thylacine because, they actually had preserved in ethanol, what we call the miracle pup, where the first sample got a 91% complete genome. In the case of the mammoth, we're actually working on we've actually analyzed 54 different mammoth genomes because they're highly, highly fragmented. Build our reference genome, right? And some of those are preserved in the permafrost, others are from museum specimens. So it really varies. But the older DNA, typically the shorter reads, typically the more fragmented, typically the more you need.
Yeah, gotcha. So you couldn't, this is a dumb question, but I can't help answer or asking it. You couldn't.
It's the Jurassic Park question.
You couldn't do Jurassic Park because you need kind of more recent.
So I think this is more on our science team, but I think the oldest DNA that we can currently read is like 1 million or a little over 1 million years, right? So there's a 64 million year gap there, and you're not dealing with tissue or bone. Right. You're actually dealing with actual fossils, which are effectively rocks. But interestingly enough, while you can't bring back a dinosaur and you can't get, a full genome or even partial genome from a dinosaur. One of our scientific advisors, Kenneth Lacavara, who's arguably the #1 paleontologist in the world who discovered Dreadnoughtus, he's actually been doing incredible work to actually demineralize dinosaur bones. And they've gotten amino acids, they've gotten proteins, and they've even gotten collagen, which is really cool. More from a scientific perspective, like intellectual curiosity perspective. So you can tell, based on the mineral type and based on the proteins, if this bone's a Triceratops versus not a Triceratops, but you don't have enough, like that's a piece of a piece of a piece of a piece of DNA. So it's not like you could engineer anything off that.
Interesting, fascinating. Wow, cool stuff. All right, let's talk about raising capital for this. So what was it like? I mean, this is such a wild story. Let's call it what it is. What was it like raising capital for this? How did you?
I was actually told, because I built, my superpower is working with much smarter women and men than me, and I built 5 companies before this. And I went to one of my close friends and advisors, and he was like, "Yeah, let me give you advice. You should not do this because you're just going to throw away your career." And so I won't say, like, I think people think because we raised a lot of money that it's been easy, which is not the case in any capital market, especially a capital market like the one we're in today, and what we've been in for the last year. So it's never easy to raise capital, at least in my experience. I've heard the stories of like, oh, I met with the VC at a bar the night before, and he wrote a term sheet on a napkin and signed it in blood, and like, that's never happened for me. I maybe one day I'll get that lucky, but I've just kind of done it the old fashioned way. But what was interesting is the original pitch, we went out and talked to a couple of people, and at the time we had 0 scientists, just a couple of business guys. We did not have a deal with Harvard, right? And so we were like, yeah, Church says he can bring back the mammoth. Can we think that's valuable. Please give us money. Like the original pitch was pretty, that's the truth. That's the data of it, right? That's what we had. And so we had a couple of meetings, we got weird responses. And then, but everyone, I had a good track record. My partners had a good track record. George Church has a great track record. And so people wanted to believe. And so then we said, I think we're going about this the wrong way. We really need to identify investors that have a long event horizon, that have patient capital. Going to just your average software as a service SaaS player is probably not the right fit for this, right?
Yeah.
So then we started becoming very mindful. And so we identified people like Thomas Tull, Jim Breyer, Tim Draper, Tom Chi, who was, co-founder of Google X. Who are these people that saw that are technology investors that have like really helped, I'd say be foundational investors in moving industries forward, like everything that Jim Breyer did with the early internet, a lot of the work that's been done in quantum with Thomas Tull. A lot of people put Thomas just in the entertainment bucket because he's a genius because of Legendary Pictures. But he's also, like, most people don't realize this, but he's got a deep understanding of physics and national security, and he does a lot in that category. So going and identifying Tim Draper with what he really helped push in the whole crypto and kind of alternative currency models. And so, going to these kind of industry luminaries and thinking about it from a different perspective, and sitting down and really having less but more, thoughtful and mindful conversations versus kind of your typical, build a spreadsheet and go talk to everyone approach. So, after the first couple of meetings, we decided to pivot to this strategy, and, it worked. We got, these incredible investors, like Thomas Tull and others that really believed in the vision, believed in George, and knew how important this was for the world, right? Because, we are outside of all of the great technologies that we're developing, outside of, the innovations and kind of the opportunities to kind of I think, make a dent in human history, the scary factor with it not just being 107 here in Texas today, but the fact that we were going to lose up to 50% of biodiversity between now and 2050, and we could have ecosystem loss. Wouldn't it be better to have this De-Extinction toolkit so that we have the know-how. Like, it's definitely not cost effective to bring back species, but wouldn't it be great to have that know-how and refine it and do better to not just preserve species, but in the event that we lose species, everything from kind of pollinators like the honeybee to keystone species like wolves, wouldn't it be like critical that we have this tech in the event that we know what the trajectory line is? And so we hope that we can do better than the trajectory line, but in the event that we don't we need these tech before it's too late, right? And so I think that the investors really understood the impact that we could have, the value creation we could have. And then, I think that if we try to have conversations like this and be very transparent and tell our story. And we think that, hopefully, if we do a good job, hopefully it will even inspire the next generation of people, that say, I want to grow up and be a scientist, just like, like SpaceX did such a good job inspiring so many, of our youth to say, I want to be an engineer because we're going to become an interplanetary species because of SpaceX, right? And I think that we can do that for biology if we're successful.
Yeah, it's really cool. Did you think about going after, I can see, maybe going after various nonprofits and foundations that are, climate or sustainability focused, and almost, did you ever think about going after just grants and,
We did, but, fundamentally we wanted to be accretive. One of the feedbacks that we get, and I think if you've read about us or seen anything about us, we're pretty open to criticism, right? Like, what's crazy is that we have over 98% positive or neutral feedback, which is insane for something this big and bold and potentially strange. But we kind of run towards critics. And I feel like you can learn a lot from an informed critic. And one of the feedbacks that we've gotten that's negative has been, you're taking money away from conservation. And to your point, if we went to all these places and grants, we would be taking away money from conservation. Our goal is to bring new money into conservation. Like, we went to technology investors, not, not people that are like spending time in Africa saving elephants, right? And so we actually intentionally went to different people, different investor groups versus nonprofits or grants, because we wanted to be accretive to the conservation movement, not detracting from it, right? And then we wanted, to subsidize the technologies that we develop and put those in the hands of great conservationists and people that are doing the hard work and boots on the ground in Africa and these other nations.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's totally logical.
But what's funny is that question is like, that's one of the negative feedbacks that we get. I'm like, no, but look who we raise money from. We didn't go to like the Gates Foundation or and all these other NGOs, right, to take money from them. We want that money to go to conservation. Ironically, that's one of the feedbacks that we get, is that we could be taking away money from conservation, which I look at as we're bringing new money in. And so that intentional thought just hasn't been, like, I think, properly dissipated through the society.
Yeah, interesting. How much have you guys raised total? How many rounds?
So we've raised a Series C, a Series A, and we just closed a Series B earlier this year. So we raised a total of $225 million.
That's awesome. And is that, that's a big war chest. Is that mostly going into R&D and science, or
yeah, so I joke, because 2.5 years ago we had 0 scientists. Now we fund 30 postdocs in academic labs around the world, and we have over 110 people at Colossal, with the vast majority of those scientists. So the vast majority goes to the science team. We've got 5 labs around the world, so some infrastructure and technology costs, but fundamentally it goes to science, reagents, and consumables for the scientific work.
Yeah, interesting.
And while it seems like big, it's actually, what we're doing is not easy. And so you've got to have lots of parallel paths. And like software, it's a systems problem. So, you can't just go do the computational biology. You can't just do the, genetic cellular engineering. You can't just do the genetic engineering or the somatic cell nuclear transfer or embryology or animal husbandry. You've got to also have like a policy layer. Like, we're working with governments. We're working with our federal government. We're working with other international governments about rewilding and helping them with their species. So there's actually, outside the science, there's a lot of policy work that also has to go around it, right? And so 225 million sounds like a lot of money, but it's really, the amount that we need at this stage of where we're going, because you have to build the entire system. You can't just build pieces, because pieces won't get you mammoths or dodos or Tasmanian tigers.
Yeah, interesting. I see some maybe surprising names like In-Q-Tel, which is the isn't that the CIA's venture fund?
Yeah, so they're a venture firm that's, I think originally spun out of it that represents more in the IC than that. But yeah, so they are an early investor and continue to be an investor.
Yeah, but like, why would they be involved in this? Or
I think synthetic biology. I think synthetic biology is a world problem, right? It's not just a private venture capital problem; it's a world problem.
Yeah.
And it's a world solution, right? And so the ability to build technologies that in engineer, life in different capacities, whether that's to cure a disease, remove plastics, clean up waterways, is something that's very interesting, I think, to the federal government and to other governments around the world, right? And so, synthetic biology is like, it's in the category of like AI or quantum or space. It's really powerful tools, and I think that over time, there'll need to be more policy around the application of these tools. And so I think that, our federal government, wants to be close to these transformative categories. They do a lot of investing in quantum, do a lot of investing in AI and space. And I think synthetic biology is that next emerging category. And I think the lessons learned that we discover along the way, could have massive applications, both from a national security perspective, but also to, be really helpful to the planet outside of, biodiversity restoration.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I know we have a hard stop. I think I have two last questions. This is one I ask everyone. What advice would you give your younger self? You guys haven't been around that long, but if you could go back a little time, what advice would you give yourself, or what advice would you give to people, maybe other scientists in this space that are thinking about starting a business and raising capital? Anything?
I think raising money for deep tech and for harder problems is definitely harder than raising for like a SaaS model. But what I will say is I kind of went through this journey where I built 5 companies and they were innovative, they were interesting, but fundamentally they were just a better version of something else that exists. And I feel like humanity's like taking these iterative kind of like updates to problems isn't really step function change that's going to move society forward. And so, we were inspired by other incredible moonshot companies out there that, got funding. They had the right team, they had the right science, they had the right technologists, and they got funding to go do really hard things that, massively we think will advance humanity, not just in their core sets, but in the halo effect of what they're doing. And so the only advice I give to myself is maybe have done one less software. I mean, you learn from everything, so it's hard to, in retrospect, go back, maybe do one less software play and, instead, work on these more moonshot type applications for humanity, because I just find a lot more fulfillment from it personally. I'm not saying everyone will, but we find a lot of, fulfillment from it. And, fundamentally, we want, I hope that more and more companies exist out there that kind of inspire people that they'll leave their jobs or their current tracks and go do this.
Yeah, I like it. All right. Now, this is a loaded question and you can skip it if you want, but yeah, I know you have a long time.
I can plead the fifth. Awesome.
But when will we perhaps see a dodo or mammoth?
No, we get, it's not that loaded. We get it asked quite often. We get the Jurassic Park and when are the two big ones. So we are targeting 2028 for our first calves. Anything that's hard like this could slip. We feel very confident. We're a year and a half, 2 years in. We feel very confident still about that date for our first mammoth calves. I will tell you that there's different challenges in the different projects that we're working on. I will tell you that I do believe you'll see a de-extinction event before 2028 based on some recent accelerations and some breakthroughs that we've had. So I would say that I think there's going to be something or sets of something before then. But, like dodos, for example, have a 30-day, gestation in the pigeon and chicken egg. So I think that it's unlike 22 months in a mammoth. So I think it's highly likely you could see another kind of de-extinction event before 2028. But 2028 is what we're targeting for the mammoth.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's cool. This is amazing stuff. If people want to learn more, it's simply colossal.com, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's just colossal.com.
Anything you want to promote or plug, open job?
No. I mean, we just, we love people's feedback. So if they have feedback, positive or negative, we'll take it. And we're just excited to be here.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to keep up with your story, and hopefully we'll get you on this show again at some point, either next round
maybe after we burst something. So
exactly. You'll have a little carrier pigeon on your shoulder next time.
It's like a little dodo. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Ben. This is great. I appreciate it. Keep up the good work. It's really, really cool. It gives some hope for humanity.
No, thanks, man. I appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Over now. Carry on.